Hey guys, welcome back to Stuff and Things for your daily dose of nerd news. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the wonderful game industry and how prevalent it is here in Canada. And after that, a doctor in the UK thinks we're looking at the whole heart disease thing completely wrong. First up, we knew the games industry was pretty big up here in Canada, but we didn't really realize how big. I mean, we're talking number 3. According to a report by the Entertainment Software Association of Canada, we're third. We're right behind US and Japan for just the number of people, the amount of money, everything invested in games development. So to break the numbers down for you, there's over 300 game development companies spread across Canada. That's employing over 16,000 people, and that's contributing $2.3 billion to the Canadian economy. And about half of that is actually in Quebec, good old Montreal, leading the charge with a bunch of big name game studios like Ubisoft has a huge studio out there. WB Games, which just released probably a terrible game by Arkham Origins, but hey, good job guys, good try. And of course Gameloft, a huge developer in the mobile scene, is apparently really big out in Montreal as well. Sure, the big guys are all great, but what's really interesting about the report is it details how big the indie scene is in Quebec. About 60% of everything in Quebec, so like half of the 60, so yeah, over a quarter of everything in Canada, the indie scene, it's all of them. And really the indie scene is where we're getting the most amount of innovation, the most interesting ideas, what the people actually want. And it's awesome to see that Quebec as a province is actually allowing people to do this. BC used to be a huge game development area. The whole West Coast, I mean, it's a thing. West Coast, you make games. It's just what it is. But BC did lose out to a bunch of great tax cuts that Quebec and Ontario governments were able to offer. But hey, it's our loss, and hopefully that numbers will keep rising and more people will work for games and more people will buy games, because games are wonderful. And moving along, Dr. Asim Malhotra, unfortunately, sorry about that, however you pronounce your name, wants to change the conversation about heart health care. Specifically in how we treat fats and how we, as his words, demonize the consumption of fatty foods. And what we do need to take a closer look at, according to him, is the impact of sugars in our diets and the replacements. Because according to him, apparently a lot of companies, since they take out the fat, which unfortunately is where we get flavor, guys. Fat is flavor and deliciousness. Butter, come on. By taking this out, by having these low-fat foods and drinks and such, they compensate for that lack of flavor by just injecting more and more sugar. He cites cases of his own patients going on these reduced fat stuff, so you know they can obviously help out the old ticker, and still suffering from heart disease, still actually getting heart attacks and progressing worse and worse in their diseases, simply because unfortunately things didn't really balance out quite well. The sugar intake increased, but that fat, sure, it went down. But another point here is that it feels that fats are treated unjustly, which there is actually some papers supporting one way or the other. It's a really huge debate that I really don't want to get into, but there is some basic facts that we can kind of tell you guys about and maybe point you in the right direction. Now, we all know about the really bad stuff. Let's start with the bad and let's go to the good, because hey, there are good fats. Bad fats, let's start with the purely unnatural trans fats. You don't find them in nature. They're entirely human-made. It's like plastic. You don't find plastic. Not existing somewhere. Except for that one moon orbiting Jupiter, I think. Maybe. But trans fats are produced when you hydrogenate oils, which means when you fry them. So you don't fry stuff in nature, so just avoid them. Don't eat them. They're out of most places now, so just avoid them. Saturated fats are the ones that get the bad rep. They're saturated because they have been saturated with hydrogen, the complex molecule. It just has an extra hydrogen in there. You find them in pretty much everything, cheeses, any sort of dairy products, beef, anything like that that's actually kind of tastes good. That's where you find those saturated fats. And then there's the unsaturated ones, and all of their stuff, like the polyunsaturated, the omega-3s and omega-6s, those are the wonderfulness. You find those in pretty much all the great things. I mean, oily fish, a bunch of other oils, sunflower oils, olive oils, nuts, and other kind of stuff. All that health food stuff, that's all great because it has these wonderful fats that help with your body and, you know, don't do the old ticker injustice. I know we've kind of said this on the show before about how to look after things. You just kind of got to be perceptive. You got to look at what you're doing. These patients he talks about who took these lower fat stuff and then had a huge sugar intake. Why aren't they looking at that themselves? Why aren't they paying attention to what they're consuming? This is a step you have to take, people. This is the omnivore dilemma that we're encountering more and more as things progress. It seems that the scene is trying to do some good for some people, but I still think he is, even though he's trying to change the conversation, he's kind of going the wrong direction. Sure, he says that the saturated fats have been demonized, but there are some points. I mean, the cholesterol levels, you can't argue with increased cholesterol levels and decreased cholesterol levels between the two types of fats. The saturated increasing, unsaturated decreasing. That's just empirical data we can collect. If he could do maybe some larger long-term studies to show exactly what he's talking about, I would be completely behind him, but I do need that. I need those extra steps taken. But it's an interesting debate, and it again does throw into light that, hey, sugars, we shouldn't have so many of them. And that's an important thing to teach everyone. Well, guys, that'll be it for today. What I really love to know from you is about specifically your diet, whether the whole idea of saturated and unsaturated fats being good and bad, if that actually just impacts your decisions. Have you taken steps to lead a healthier life, or you just love those cheeseburgers? Let me know in the comments down below. And of course, if you like what you've seen, do not forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons wherever they happen to be. And we'll check you in the next video.